for November 26th. Elaine, if you'll please read the roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller? Mr. Browning?
Here.
Mr. Rohr? Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here.
Motion to excuse Councilwoman Keller.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Browning. Any further objection? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Item 2 on the agenda is invocation. Tonight will be led by Pastor Scott Logan with Agape International and will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Good afternoon, everyone. Father, first we thank and praise you for your goodness and your mercy. We thank you for all that you have done and all that you're doing in our lives. We don't take this responsibility lightly, and we certainly need you in all that we do. So our prayer, Lord God, is that you will lead and guide and direct each and every one in their various roles and responsibilities. But we know, Lord God, in all our ways, you teach us to acknowledge you and you should direct our path. So we look to you knowing that you're the author and the finisher of our faith. And you know, Lord God, the future of the city and all of the challenges as well as all the blessings. So we pray, Lord God, for wisdom, understanding, direction. We pray for each one's family, Lord, and in good health. In your precious name we pray, in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, Pastor Logan. Item 4 is the approval of motion summary of the regular meeting of council held November 12th, 2018, as recorded and transcribed. What is the wish of council?
I move for approval of motion summary.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Browning, a second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Abstain. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary of the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting held on October 10th, 2018, as recorded and transcribed. Item B, acceptance of the motion summary of the Records Commission meeting held on July 25th, 2018, as recorded and transcribed. Item C, resolution number 18-63, a resolution authorizing the dedication of 2 parking stalls at the south end of the East William Street public parking lot for use as electric vehicle charging stations. Item D, resolution number 18-64, a resolution authorizing the modification of parking stalls in the North Franklin Street city parking lot to provide centralized refuse collection for nearby businesses to bring handicap accessible parking stalls into compliance with Americans with Disability Act requirements and repealing resolution number 14-08 in its entirety. Item E, resolution number 18-66, a resolution designating City Attorney Darren Showman and Assistant City Attorney City Prosecutor Chris Ballard as City Council designees for required public records training. And item F, established December 10th, 2018 at 7:15 p.m. as a date and time for a public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 18-114, an ordinance amending the schedule of fees and service charges.
Which is the wish of council on the consent agenda?
I move for approval of consent agenda.
Motion by Mr. Browning, second by Mr. Schaefer. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 is time set aside for letters, petitions, or anything on public comments that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? Seeing none, we'll close that part of it and we'll move on to the committee reports. Mr. Jones, do you have anything?
I have none there.
Mr. Browning?
None, thank you.
Mr. Rohr?
None, thank you.
Mr. Hellinger?
None.
Mr. Schaefer?
None, thank
All right, that was quick.
Mayor Riggle? May
Yes.
I interrupt for just a moment?
Oh, I guess you could do Main Street.
So there is a little Main Street update. I just want to give you a quick thing that this coming weekend is our Home for the Holidays event. So starting Friday at November 30th is the tree lighting. And something new that they're going to be doing this year is offering data shuttle from Mingo from 5:30 to 9:30. And then Saturday there's events all day. And then Sunday we end with our Christmas parade at 3.
Very good. Thank you very much for the update.
Thank you.
Hope to see everyone there.
Ask a question. Is the ice skate rink going to be back this year?
It is not this
Oh,
year.
rats, okay.
You can fund it next year.
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
it's very
I'll do that.
expensive to fund,
Yeah.
and so we decided we took off a year, maybe we'd get more sponsors, because they realize how much it's missed this year.
Okay, all
What I
right,
heard.
duly noted.
Okay. Item 8 is consideration of a liquor permit transfer. Elaine, if you'll please with us.
Okay. Consideration of the liquor permit transfer to ADT Ohio LLC at 241 South Sandusky Street, Delaware, Ohio, 43015 from America's Pizza Company LLC doing business as Pizza Hut, 024173 at 241 South Sandusky Street, Delaware, Ohio, 43015, permit class D1.
Madam Mayor, members of council, for consideration is a transfer of the liquor permit at Pizza Hut. Essentially, they have a new ownership group that purchased this and about 125 other Pizza Huts across the country. No change in how they're doing business, no issues with the applicants, and no basis for requesting a hearing.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief? Any motions?
Recommend approval without objection.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Thank you. Item 9 is consideration of resolution number 18-65, a resolution establishing guidelines to establishing new community authorities.
This was a request at the last meeting. We actually had provided in previous council packets some suggested guidelines for new community authorities going forward. This was our attempt to at least address that. I know we did get some feedback from the applicant in regards to that, so there are some suggestions made regarding that. You don't have to act on this tonight. I think the concern was that if you do act favorably on the Terra Alta NCA, that you establish some principles for future new community authorities. So at least there's some parameters that council can establish so that we don't, that we have some method of deciding when and under what circumstances they would be appropriately used. So that's what's before you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. I know, Darren, you had to actually work with Dave Eflin on putting this together.
Yes, I want to throw out a couple more background thoughts. Again, this was requested based on council feedback. It's not a requirement to vote on this prior or even at all or along with the Terra Alta thing. They're actually completely separate issues. One is the Terra Alta application. One is we don't necessarily, we had some feedback. We didn't like everything that was in this one or whatever, but how do we go forward so it could come down the road if you wanted. And again, they're guidelines because you wanted to give people advance notice of how council looks at these things. That doesn't mean they're ironclad rules or regulations. That just kind of tells potential future applicants, this is the kind of things we like, these are the kind of things we don't like. That doesn't mean if someone had a pitch that didn't meet one of the criteria, but you wanted to do it, you certainly still could. It's just kind of doesn't surprise anybody in the future.
Comments on it?
Yeah, my thought is, I think we've got some good feedback from legal counsel who's got some experience in this area. I think it might be helpful just to get our staff, and maybe them, I don't know, just a small work group together to kind of, if we're gonna do this, let's get it right, and just take a little bit more time to kind of think those things through. That would be my recommendation, rather than act on this tonight.
Oh, yeah. I can do that tonight. Any other comments on it?
I was trying to think of unique situations. If we had a Miranova approach us and want to build $1 million condos, and then on the other side of things, if we had a low-cost housing developer come in and want to, so I was trying to maybe go a little strange, but I was also trying to think through those situations and how we probably want to help or encourage those types of developers as well.
And that's not strange at all, Councilman Browning. It's impossible to write guidelines to cover everything, but I would say in my mind, how I view what happened is that person would say, I'd like to do an NCA for this. It doesn't necessarily fit your guidelines. Can I have a meeting before I get this project started to see if this might be something council would be willing to do, even though it doesn't fit the guidelines? We get some feedback and say, okay, that seems like a go. They build that in and they go forward. So it still would be very possible. It just required them to say, can I work through that early in the process? I hope.
So are you saying that you don't want to act on this one tonight? But are we going to set some time aside
Right.
to go over it? Because I got a bunch of questions about it.
Yeah, you can ask him right now.
No, that's fine. It's nothing to do with the next item, so it's,
You're more than
no,
welcome. to ask.
I'm good. I'm just,
Okay. Because I kind of like to
Well,
hear
if
what,
they-
yeah, I'd
if
rather
they
hear
have to
him.
do with this.
no, I'm just trying to understand a few things, just, like, where it says the NCA will not be approved to reimburse for the cost of items typically required to pay by developer. What I can't, et cetera, what I can't get my head around is I still understand the reporting status of it. So if an NCA is established and then in 3 years they decide to build something else, I mean, how's the city notified? I mean, how is that stuff tracked?
Well, we're,
That they're using the NCA dollars, that it fits that criteria. Does that make sense?
it does, and I think you appoint on this NCA, if you do the Terra Alta NCA, you will have, the majority of the board will be city appointees.
Okay.
I mean, that's one way, Chris, is to monitor it that way. You just get reports from the members. But
So is that something we would want for all future NCAs is,
I think that's pretty standard.
oh, is it? Okay.
Other question?
No, I'm okay.
You sure?
Mm.
Okay. Can we move on to anybody else? Have questions on that? For the vote?
How are
So
we
who do you want us to
gonna-
work
how are we gonna
with?
Proceed.
Who do you want us to work with? I mean, we can set up a meeting.
I was just a couple of members of council and staff and whoever we're going to bring in from the outside for guidance. Darren obviously must be involved.
Dave?
Yeah, right.
And I guess I just don't like wording when things say like the city prefers. I think it needs to be cut and dry. Either we say that an NCA has a time limit or it doesn't have the time limit, you know? I'm always sketchy on when we need stuff up in the air like that.
Yeah, even though it is a resolution, it's non-binding.
Yeah.
But yes, I think if you're going to state a position, if you're going to state a position, state a position.
Right.
Don't be wishy-washy.
It's trying, I can tell you from working on it, the first draft, it's difficult to strike the balance between concrete language and then I've now adopted the new Browning rule, the how do we deal with flexible situations in the future. So that's what we're trying to do, but we can definitely tighten it more or we can make it more flexible. So that'd be helpful to get that feedback from everybody. There's no there's no right or wrong answers. There's really council saying this is what we like.
A little bit of both.
So who from council wants to work on this?
I'd love to.
I would say. That's the one we'd rather do it.
Mayor. No, you can't work on it. No. That might be a good idea. Michael Shade, Post Office Box, 438 Delaware, Ohio. You received the email from our team regarding just the general nature of the resolution. And, you know, I spent about 2.5 hours in the air today going back through everything for tonight's meeting. And I would proceed with absolute caution on this. One of the things that popped in my mind, you know, you have one in place that basically will ultimately build Glen Road Parkway. That was basically government driven. But you may, and you're looking at, and you may have parts of that in some kind of community authority with regard to Merrick. But the biggest lift is going to be when you look at presidential from 23 over to 36. You have 2 railroad crossings and tying millage, limiting yourself by resolution or otherwise. I would say follow what the state proposed. You don't always have to get there, but there may be something that you have a developer that wants to do a project in that presidential corridor. And they may need, in order to get things done, they may need additional development money. But the heaviest lift is going to be wanting to build Presidential Parkway. So you might have 5 mills for that and 5 mills to the developer. I just would proceed with great caution in trying to limit this. I would also urge you that in the 23 to 26 community authorities that have been done in Central Ohio, and I wish Greg was here tonight because Greg knows better than, and is he? Great, knows him better than anybody. No other community has done guidelines with regard to NCAs. They basically followed what the state has prescribed. And I would just urge you to, as you go through this, and I think our team would be happy to, give you feedback and stuff like that, since we're the first private one out of the gate. But I mean, there was a lot of thought that went into this. You take just the roadway cost of the midpoint road from in Terra Alta, going from Pollock to Berlin Station unloaded is a tremendous cost. And what I have a hard time grasping is trying to come up with some kind of commonality. Tom has felt very strongly about the 5.5 mils. 5.5 mils may work in a traditional thing with 200 acres. We're at 500 acres. You can't, in the requirements and the things that you want and the things that the developers want to do to attract the kind of quality buyers that we've been trying to look at for the last 30 years in the city of Delaware. I just think I would urge caution. I think it's good to have the debate. I think it's good to have the discussion. And I can tell you truthfully and honestly, when I went back through it, and there could be differences of opinion across the board on it, I'm not sure that the government hasn't, the state government hasn't set the standard here. And I'm not sure that they really want. Now, the code, or chapter 349 very clearly talks about that, there's no abandonment of police powers. There's no abandonment of zoning codes and zoning regulations. And those can't be obfuscated by just simply some guidelines or some other, even by chapter 349. The states left that to the local governments to do. It's just that I think that when we go forward as a community, you're the council today. The council tomorrow may have a different idea. They may have different thoughts. We don't know what the pressure is going to be economically. We know what the growth has felt like, and we've all heard it from the people that drive in our neighborhoods and stuff. We wish it sure was easier to get through town. But I would just be very cautious. I would move cautiously on this. Get dialogue from other people. Get some other feedback from other developers. I think you can come up with it. The BIA could probably provide some insight, and you certainly have a plethora of communities you can also talk to that have gone through this same set of circumstances. But that's what I would urge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 10 minutes. Can you do 10 and 10 minutes? 8 minutes. Okay. Let's move on to item 10. If you'll please read this and be on the record.
Ordinance number 18-90, an ordinance finding that the creation of the Terra Alta Community Authority will be conducive to the public health, safety, convenience, and welfare and is intended to result in the development of a new community, declaring that authority to be organized in a body politic and corporate, defining the boundary of that authority's new community district, providing the method of appointing members to that authority's board of trustees, and fixing the surety for those trustees' bonds.
Thank you. You were Darren.
We're ready. I mean, if really, we need to know where council is on this, and
So,
if you do make changes, the petition, as we indicated, needs to be amended, and
yeah, so here is sort of the Darren catch up to where we are. This is the petition is in place. This is the legislation to approve the petition. Council has, in concurrence with the guidelines, some concerns. They got a recommendation from Tom on it as well. But right now, the petition is the same petition that it was. So if there are probably 4 things that I've heard about that either need to be resolved, that they're fine the way they are, or need to be looked at, or it could just go as it is. And these are just my notes. I could be wrong, but I've heard discussions of the amount of the charge. I've heard discussion on millage to the city. I think there was some conversation that 0.5 mils could be dedicated to the city. That's not in the current draft. I've heard discussion of some sort of end date trigger with the idea that it could still go on at the nominal charge, but and rolls back. Plus, as we've all discussed, the residents, when they take over this thing, could vote to continue it. But there was some sort of end date that we wanted to see. And then I didn't make this up, but I heard some conversation about, well, if it's a higher millage, maybe it gets paid off faster. That could be true, but then the question is, what is the bonding amount that can be borrowed? So that's another number that council has to decide on. So if you say you can borrow 5 mil, but we're going to let the reimbursement charge be 7, that would accomplish what I think the mayor might have said in a prior meeting, whereas if it's higher, that would pay it off faster. If you don't have that lower borrowing amount, then having a higher charge doesn't accomplish the pay it off faster. So those are the 4 factors that council should either give guidance on or say, we don't like the draft the way it is, let's vote, or give the developer guidance so that they can amend that petition to get it to where we can vote on it. Is that a fair summary, Tom?
yeah, I think so. And if you're gonna, that's really, we've talked about this for a number of meetings. I think there's a lot of merit to what has been proposed. I understand the situation that Mike and the team have talked to council about. And, we just need to decide, council just needs to decide policy question here. Are you inclined to consider this? And if so, what are those parameters? They make the amendment to the petition gets amended, and then it gets voted on. We didn't have, the mayor wasn't here at the last meeting, and so we didn't have as much discussion about it. So we're in it. You talked about putting a working group together to work on the other thing. That might help with this. We need to get this. I think council wants to get this off its agenda, and I think the developer wants some resolution here, because there are lots out there. They're ready to be sold, and they obviously need to know what ultimately the city's going to do.
It's my understanding the developer submitted to us a couple of spec sheets, and in either case, whether the millage is at 7 or 5, they're proposing an amount financed of $5 million. Is that correct?
Yes, version 4, the latest version, it's the latest version.
Yeah, but the current petition it would have to reflect that. The current petition is.
If the principal amount stays the same, then I'm in favor of the higher millage, which allows it to be paid off sooner, to return to the owner sooner, which would be 7.5 with 0.5% going to the city.
Half a mil.
Or 0.5 mil going to the city. So it's my understanding that by state law, once that principal amount is paid off, then basically this is turned over to the residents, and they can then make a decision to discontinue it entirely, pick another millage level that suits them to move forward. So if I'm correct on those things, that would be my recommendation.
I'm with you.
Move ahead.
Do we have any idea though, at 7.5, what that time frame would be? I mean, guesstimated? I know, you usually gotta sell this and that, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a function of how many homes are built per year and what the value of those homes are, but I think the estimated payback was 15, 20 years.
It's 17 years of all things, all the predictions and assumptions remain the same.
I remember what that number was.
Payoff.
So I'm taking notes, so I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So it sounds like two of you at least, would set the borrowing at the 5 mils, but the charge at 7.5 mils with 5 mils going to the city. So I did the same thing, 0.5 mils. Hey, 5 mils is even better. We'll take 7 points. So 5 mils to the city, we leave 7 to pay off the 5 million in borrowing.
I'll agree with that too.
I support that as well.
And again, I think the 0.5 dedicated to the city is for access to the river from the project. This is not 0.5 mils to go into the city's general fund for operating. It's really for an amenity related to the project. So, but that would have to be reflected in the petition.
So we got 4 agreements on that.
So I guess my point is, if we're in agreement that that's correct, and developers can verify that that's correct, and at that point, we need to have the petition amended. Is that right, Tom? So
Yes.
it reflects those. There's nothing.
George, did you have anything to add?
No.
Okay.
What were your other questions, or you?
That's pretty good.
The end date's going to take care of when it gets paid for and it gets turned back over, as Ken said earlier.
It might be digging too into the weeds and minutia. I didn't list this as one of my 4, but since you're picking a number, if there are, I know that number might not, it might be helpful to know which things that's covering. It doesn't necessarily matter, but to the extent that you're setting the guideline recommendations that this is what we're covering later on, I don't think it really matters, but if you have thoughts on it, Carolyn's giving me like a really scary look.
No,
Forget
I
it.
don't think we should tell the developers how to do their job.
Well, then I think if that's what you guys want, that's well, ask them if they understand or agree to that, but if they do, that's all they do.
Have I missed anything?
Wait, name and address for the record.
My name's Greg Stipe. I'm an attorney with Barnes & Thornburg, 41 South High Street, Columbus, Ohio, Suite 3300.
David Fisher, Kephart Fisher, another attorney for the developer, 207 North 4th Street, Columbus, 43215.
And what we understand, you're the expert too.
Well, I just wanted to summarize in all of the discussions I've heard in the developers working group what I perceive to be the developer's latest proposal to City Council, which I think bears a resemblance. It's not exactly the same as what you discussed, but the proposal has been 7.5 mils, 1/2 mil, the proceeds of 1/2 mil committed to be used at the direction of the city. If the city's direction is for access to the river through a park, that's fine. 7 mils committed to the payment of debt service on community facilities that have not yet been installed and the costs of which have not yet been incurred. Mr. Fisher has submitted to City Council his option list number 4, I believe it was, that listed a specific set of community facilities that totaled $5,822,000. The largest portion of those was for the cost of the roundabout, if I recall correctly. But there were community pools and other things. Those were derived because the city asked that these be items that have not yet been paid for or installed. And they were derived as well because there was some early discussion about amenities that are going to singularly drive the idea that this can be a development that drives up the price point in the city and in the school district. Furthermore, we understand that when the debt is paid off, the millage would drop to 1/2 mil. That would be used for a maximum of 1/2 mil, I should say, which would be used simply to administer the costs of the community authority on an annual basis, because it would continue to be a community facility property owner the way it has been proposed. At the same time, I think it's important to remind council that the proposal is further, that when we get to the point that the bonds are paid off, then what's contemplated is that all the members of the Community Authority Board of Trustees at that point in time would be elected by people who live in the community in the same fashion that an HOA at some point gets turned over to the community as well. David, am I forgetting any of the major features?
That's what I had down.
Right.
That's it.
So that has to be reflected in the revised petition, and then it has to come back and you vote on it.
Can we dance back to the next meeting?
Yeah, that would be the plan.
I'm sorry, can I just say?
I just said that we have it done by the next meeting.
We don't have it, that they can submit it.
Yeah.
No
So the
problem
one
at
they
all.
submitted is not what he just said then? Everything you just went over?
We have the original
Okay,
petition.
so we've never gotten the amended.
Well, we haven't really,
We never really had an
agree on
agreement.
what the underlying amount is going to be and the purpose is, and now that we have, then the petition gets changed.
I was hoping to amend that one that we already have and get this done. and
Right,
get
that's
off
why I'm
the
asking,
books.
just trying to.
I just.
Yeah,
We don't have to start the process again.
Right.
We don't have to start the
Tonight.
process. We just have to get amended petition, and then that will be the petition you vote on. So it could be the next meeting, assuming we get it by packet.
By tomorrow?
That would be.
No, you
I
vote
think
on
if
one
we
time.
had from.
I'm just offering to have.
Oh,
it to
yeah,
you
tomorrow's
tomorrow.
great.
If we had from the team tomorrow, just an outline of what Mr. Stipe just indicated, Mr. Fisher just indicated, verify that, and then that, say, yeah, that looks good.
Mr.
or the
Homan and
petition.
Mayor, if I may, I propose to take it a step further. We'll have more than an outline. We'll have the language to
Okay,
it tomorrow.
that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Good. And we can.
Just to make sure, because I want to make sure this breezes through. Are we going with the 5.5 or the?
7.
No, but the five borrowing? That,
7.57 to the borrowing and $500,000 to the city to use as it sees fit.
And if I may, for clarification for council based on Mr. Schulman's question, the amount of borrowing is tied to a dollar amount. It's not tied to a millage amount.
Okay.
So the way I think of it is the maximum amount to be borrowed for the improvements, for the cost of the improvements is Mr. Fisher's list, 5.822 million. That's the maximum amount. If that can be supported out of the 7 mills, terrific. If it can't be supported out of the 7 mills, the 7 mills is the limit.
But it's also for improvements that have not yet.
None of which are on the ground today.
That's what
So the
Mr.
street-
Fisher's list is.
Okay. Version 4 was to be constructed.
Nothing on the ground.
Correct.
so the number changed a little bit. You're okay with the 5.8 or 5.8 instead of borrowing?
Whatever that last list was.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
So I-
version 4.
5.82.
It's,
Okay, because I had the number at 5. I want to make sure we don't get caught up
Yeah,
with
it's
that.
5,822,000.
And by the way, just to help understand this point, that list is 5.822 million, but the spreadsheets we sent you based on the interest rate runs that we thought were available at the time demonstrate that we can probably only borrow $5 million. And even at that rate, you can't have any carried interest in there. So basically, the developer doesn't earn interest during the period of time until the revenues from the millage start generating enough income to pay the bonds back.
Two quick questions. I know I've heard the number, it's in here someplace, but just based on the average house sale over there, what would that fee be to an owner? With 75 cents on?
35%, yeah,
$375,000 house,
Yeah.
7.5 mils is $2,812.50.
Just to be able to answer that question. The second question, just being nosy, how come what's so fancy about the Terra Alta pool that's $900,000 more than the Stockdale pool? Just be nosy.
It's bigger,
Is it
bigger,
bigger?
more
It's a nice pool for
boundaries on the house.
$100,000.
Yeah. It's the first one.
Okay, we have a plan. Thank you.
We'll
See
come
you
back with that. I want
in
to
2
thank you
weeks.
for your time and interest.
Okay.
We're going to jump on down to item 13, which is 7:30 public hearing Elaine, if you'll please read this on the record.
Ordinance number 18-109, an ordinance making appropriations for the year 2019 and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and further to provide lawful appropriations available for expenditure by January 1st, 2019, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you.
So this is the first public hearing required by charter on the city's proposed 2019 budget, and the discussion of which will begin at the conclusion of this meeting. Council has elected to start that process this evening. We have directors ready to be ready for presentations, as well as the clerk of court and one of our judges. Our municipal court judges is here this evening, so they're anxiously waiting, as is our lead prosecutor. She's here as well. So, but it's a public hearing, and probably underscores, well, I guess you want to ask anybody in the public.
Is there anyone in the public that would like to come forward at this time? Not give your reports, ladies, but yes, Tom.
Tom Walder, 272 Hearthstone Drive. I'm not fully prepared, but I would like to bring up one topic. Last year, I suggested an idea, submitted it in writing. It went nowhere. I never got a response. It didn't show up anywhere, and certainly it was not part of the final budget plan. So this year I'm trying again in a more public forum. I am referring to the proposed 2019 budget plan under planning and community development. The goal was last year, the goal remains this year, to remove blighted and condemned properties in the city of Delaware. Here's a quote, from this year's budget. This activity has resulted in about 24 blighted properties being raised in recent years. Dozens of properties have been demolished over a number of years. I'm here to impress upon City Council that the surrounding communities are moving away from demolishing and raising blighted properties. Not every so-called blighted structure, needs to be raised. Some need to be demolished. Sometimes it's more expensive to rehab them, to rehabilitate them, than to demolish them. But I've seen structures that are perfectly salvageable. They can be repaired. All it sometimes takes is a new roof, or new windows, or a new patio, or a new porch, or something like that. Habitat for Humanity in Delaware County and Union counties are actively supporting home repairs, as Mayor Riggle no doubt now knows. Habitat Humanity of Franklin County is doing the same thing. They try to balance, to find the right balance between demolishing houses and rehabbing houses. MOPSI too is very actively encouraging its members, including Delaware, to move away, from blindly demolishing every so-called blighted structure. It's expensive to remove them, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. Sometimes it's cheaper to fix them up. I don't have, the state of Ohio expressly allows funds to go for rehabilitation projects. I submitted that specific paragraphs and wordings last year. I don't have it with me today, but I can certainly do that if necessary. So the state of Ohio too is in favor of demolishing some blighted properties, but saving others that can be saved. Okay, so I think I'm suggesting, I would like to impress upon City Council that the City of Delaware has yet to find the right balance, between demolition and salvage of blighted properties. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Anybody else in the audience like to come forward this time? Okay, so we'll close the public hearing. Lane, if you'll go back up and read 11 and 12.
Ordinance number 18-105, an ordinance approving a preliminary subdivision plat request by Macapa LLC for Bell Commons for 4 single-family lots on approximately 1.344 acres on property zoned R3 one-family residential district and located on the north side of Bell Avenue and on the east side of Liberty Road.
Mr. Eflin?
And ordinance number... Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ordinance number 18-106, an ordinance approving a final subdivision plat request by Macapa LLC for Bell Commons on 4 single-family lots on approximately 1.344 acres on property zoned R3 one-family residential district and located on the north side of Bell Avenue and on the east side of Liberty Road.
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is for the subdivision, both preliminary and final, known as Bell Commons. It is located along Bell Avenue. Here you can see the large area zoned R3 single family residential today. Outlined in red is the area of the subject 4 lots. See if I can get the pointer to work. We've been working with the developer on this entire area, which includes another 9.5 acres for, let's say, many months. At any rate, might be up to a year at this point, to try to encourage them to think about doing something other than single-family development here if possible and provide a land use transition between our industrial area and our residential areas to the east and to the south. And we're interested in doing that. We've been through some preliminary layouts for that area. However, some of the infrastructure costs, I think, just exceeded what they were willing to bring forward at this time for the balance of the property. So they decided to bring forward the 4 lots along Bell, which continues the residential development here. This is what we would characterize as staff as a by right subdivision. It meets the zoning code, subdivision regulations, and engineering requirements in all respects. And so we don't see a reason to deny this request. As aerial photograph, should we need it, now zooming in on that red box area from the last visual. But you could see there's houses here, and this area would be divided into 4 lots that would actually exceed the minimum requirements of the R3. Contained in your packet, I'm sure it's probably a lot easier to read in there than it is maybe even on the screen, are the 4 lots, each of which would be over 15,000 square feet, about 68 by 225 feet deep. And then that balance of the property as well. I would surely encourage and hope that the developer might come back with the balance of that property, and we could maybe conclude discussions on some reasonable transition of land use that might not be single-family residential. However, it's well within their rights to bring forward a single-family subdivision on the entire piece. Again, I think infrastructure costs are a big reason why they didn't do that to date, but I don't think they've given up on that idea either. Your planning commission did recommend unanimous approval of this at their last meeting, as do we as staff. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from Mr. Eflin? Would the developer like to come forward this time and add anything?
Good evening.
Good evening.
What questions can I answer?
Oh, I don't think they had any questions. I said, do you want to add anything to it?
Well, the only thing that we add to it is we feel that this is very comparable to what is in the neighborhood and fits very well.
Okay.
You're about a third of an acre each. A little larger actually than most of the lots in the neighborhood.
Any questions for the applicant?
Sir, can I get your name and address for the record, please?
Pardon?
Your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Jim Allman and 1520 Hyatt's Road, Delaware.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any motions?
I will suspend the rules requiring two readings of ordinance 18-105.
Second.
Oh, hang on, hold that thought. I guess we have someone in the audience who'd like to come forward, even if you'll step away so she can come forward, please. If you'll step back so she can come forward, I think she has a question. You can have a seat, Jim. Let's see. If you'll pull the microphone over, please.
Okay. Hello, I'm Stephanie Gregory. I live at 110 Tabelore Loop, Delaware, Ohio. And I've been watching the planning for the development, and I am here to shine a light on a concern that I have for the development. And I'm part of Sustainable Delaware, Ohio, and concern that other members have had. The issue is with Liberty Castings and the air pollution that is produced by that factory. And we have been concerned with the quantity of air pollution for a while. It's something that's been an issue probably for decades. But I came here tonight because I couldn't in good conscience sit back and agree to a development going into that location with air pollution the way it is. I became aware of the pollution problem 10 years ago, and when I was pregnant and had to hold my breath as I drove past, and now my kids ask me to roll up the windows every time we drive past. I've been at First Fridays. Like, I smell the air pollution all the way over to Sandusky Street. I've talked to people over by the Aldi's area. And so anyways, the pollution is far reaching. I myself would not want to be in the direct airflow of the pollution. I would love for a development to be built there. I think your plan is really nice, but I don't want the inhabitants of your houses to have to breathe that air, because I myself would not want to. I'm lucky my house is close to the factory, and usually the airflow doesn't go in our way, it goes north. But sometimes the air changes, and I've gone out to go jogging and I've had to turn around and go back in my house because I didn't want to breathe the air. So I love our town, and I love the people here, and I know that you don't have any control over what's going on as far as the air pollution. I want you to be able to inhabit those houses. So I think we need to find a solution. And one of the problems is the proximity. There's not much buffer between the factory and the housing. And the other problem is, I really believe we need to hold our factories to a higher standard, and we should have lower emissions. So thank you for your consideration. I appreciate it.
We did reach out to the company, and as far as I know, everything is up to standard. The new fans that they were, exhaust fans or whatever they were told to put in, they did that. He was hoping to be here tonight. He was coming in from Columbus to answer any questions.
I would love that, because we were aware that a grant had been given maybe a year ago to help deal with the emissions, but we haven't heard anything. We haven't seen a lot of it. We haven't smelled a lot of improvement as far as the emissions. It would be nice to know what was going on with the factory. Yeah.
We can ask them to come and, give us an update.
That would be amazing. And if there's ways that we can hold our factories accountable to make sure that their emissions are low, that would be incredible for all of us. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So do you want to go there or do you want to hold off? What do you want to do now?
Well, we give Libby Cassidy a chance to.
Yeah, I spoke with Mr. James, who's the plant manager, and he was in Columbus at another meeting, wasn't sure he was going to be able to make it tonight. But if you want to give him an opportunity just to discuss it. This has been discussed in prior meetings. They are regulated by the EPA in terms of the emissions that come out of that factory in the processes they use for the manufacturing for the foundry itself. So and if you want an update from him as to where they are, and they have a number of different permits. They have permits for the new expansion City Council approved a couple of years ago. Then they have permits for the existing facility. So if you think that would be beneficial, we can arrange for that.
Well, I remember last time they were in, we had that discussion with them. Of course, I know they're up to standard, but for the sake of the concerns that have been brought up here tonight, I don't have a problem.
Okay.
And ultimately, the developer has right to move ahead with this development, but I think
they're
us to get some input and I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, we'll take it to another reading and hope that he can be here that night.
Yep, I'll reach out to him.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to item 14, which is consideration of ordinance number 18-110. If you'll please give this in the record.
Ordinance number 18-110, an ordinance amending the Delaware Municipal Court and Clerk of Court employee benefits and leave policies and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause. This ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, property, health, safety, and welfare of the city. The emergency clause is required to enact the changes effective on December 26, 2018. Therefore, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, Clerk DeNovo. Basically, there weren't any changes to the actual leave policies and benefits. Big changes were budget items, so I'm here to answer any questions you have for the court tonight.
I talked to Darren today about it and told him there were no changes on that, so I wasn't quite sure why that was coming back in front of council. I didn't know, in the years past, we've brought it back to council because there have been changes to it, but there are no changes this year.
Dates have to be changed.
Yeah, dates, we have to.
The dates of
the pay plan.
I think theirs, and they do theirs differently than ours. Theirs just says effective.
Ours just
blank.
says effective like December 25th or 26th. And the holidays are marked as Martin Luther King Day, Memorial Day. They don't have specific dates on them.
What I would do, and I do apologize, we made a checklist after last year to make sure we tracked everything going forward. So we reached out and said, hey, can we have your pay plan? But it never occurred to me that there might be no changes. So what I'll do is I'll just take a look at it. It may be where we can just pull this item before the budget because it's the same, or it might just be worth voting on it again. But
I mean, it's
Either way, I'm fine, as long as we know we get funded next year.
yeah, the budget will definitely have changes, I assume, but the pay plan might not. So
okay. We'll look into making changes for next year for you.
You're not gonna give them Brown Jug Day off.
Does anybody have any questions since they're here? Okay.
Okay, this is just the pay plan. Are we moving?
Do you want to talk about their budget now, or do you want to
do that?
do the? Yeah.
Yes, please.
Well, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, City Manager Homan. Thanks for having us here tonight. Cindy Genova, Municipal Court Clerk. Did you introduce yourself?
I'm Judge Mary Ann Hemmeter. I'm one of the municipal court judges.
So does anybody have any question on either of our budgets? While you're looking at it, I'll just give you a couple updates that I've had. I've had a position that I haven't filled, and there's a couple reasons for that. But one of them is that through our IT individuals, we have worked through and enhanced our digital workflow in-house. So there is less movement of cases, more in a digital workflow, which is a good thing. Eventually, hopefully, we'll go to less paper. I'm never going to say paperless because I don't think the court will ever live in a paperless world. The other thing is that we are working with CMI, who's most Civica Creative Microsoft, our case management system, to develop a bench module, which would assist the judges on the bench. And it would mean that I would not have to have a staff member in the courtroom. That's another reason I haven't hired this other position that I have open, because if we do get to move to this bench module, I don't want to have someone in and then have to let them go. Let's see, we are on our current case management system, we are looking at an upgrade in January. We're going to be one of the first courts to beta that and get that up and running. We're moving from J Drive, which is the old programming, to SQL. So we're excited about that. Our caseload is a little bit down this year in traffic by about 4,000. There was a change in leadership at the patrol post. The post commander changed, and since we have been down several cases, so about 4,000 this year. So that may be our new normal. I'm not sure. That's another reason that I've kind of squeaked by and not having to hire that additional employee. The other thing that I have done is, I believe I talked about this last year, but it is up and running. Our records are available online. Civil is available to anyone in the public. All of the documents that are filed. Criminal traffic is only available to law enforcement and local attorneys, well, any attorney that uses our system, because I chose not to put it out to the public because of that traffic ticket having everything, the name, the date of birth, the driver's license, the last four of the social, everything except their mother's maiden name. And so with identity theft, the information is still available for folks to come and get it from us, just not available readily online. And then the last thing I have to say is I look forward to running for re-election next year.
Any questions from Stephen?
Okay. On the court side, although the traffic numbers are down, our probationable cases are up. And we did add a probation officer last year, so our probation staff has grown. However, the caseload has also grown. At average, each probation officer has about 250 cases on average. That is about 50 cases more than any probation officer should have by all national standards. Even on the state level, even at a municipal court level, they say to get it to around 200 cases. We anticipate within the next 2 years, probably another specialized docket. We anticipate that even though State Issue 1 did not pass, every proposal that's coming up now is shifting felonies to misdemeanors. It's not going to increase the court's workload a lot as for like the judge and my staff, but probation and the prosecutor's office will certainly feel that pinch. So we'll have to see how that goes. But probation numbers are still extraordinarily high. I think we are kind of at where we need to be. We are going to continue to work and maybe look at other ways to siphon off some of the people off of probation, like, for example, nonviolent theft offenses, perhaps more diversion, perhaps doing some other types of programs so that they are not on probation for as long as we typically put them. But we are looking at alternatives because we're out of space in the probation department. I'm going to put one of my probation officers in a hallway pretty soon because there's no privacy in the hallway where the probation officers currently are. So even though caseload's down, what we're seeing is it's the traffic cases that never really did anything as far as putting stress on the probation department. Those cases are still growing. We have seen what I'd see an uptick in domestic violence cases and what I would consider very serious domestic violence cases. The prosecutor can speak to that, which has put increase on our GPS systems and our scram units and the kind of monitoring that I expect our probation department to do on those cases. We continue to work through that. We're busy, but it is what it is. We have done things to reduce some costs, but staffing is staffing and it's always expensive. I don't see an increase in the staff, and we didn't put in for one for 2019, but I would perhaps see one 2020 and 21, depending on what happens with the drug codes.
I think the other thing, I don't know if you want to address, Judge Hemmeter, is the bail reform. If there's going to be a need for.
Bail reform is going to come. I've been told that they're going to tinker with what courts are expected to do. And it will not be an administrative code. It will be a statute where every municipal court will have to have a pretrial supervision officer that will be expected to use what's called ORAS. It's an algorithm. It's a risk assessment. Several courts in Ohio use it, Lucas County being one of the bigger ones. It costs money, and it will require me to hire somebody because right now I don't have the staff to run ORAS for every person that's arrested. That's what would be required by statute. I know the Municipal Court Association, Judges Association is split in half about whether they think it's a good thing or not. The courts that tend to like it are your bigger courts that have 20 to 30 probation officers and get lots of federal money. We are going to start applying for grants for 2019 for the probation department. But even if we were lucky enough to get any grants, it would not cover a pretrial supervision officer. That is something we do foresee happening. Again, we're going to have to wait and see. ORAS also has a cost attached to it. You can't just use it. It's proprietary. So by statute, I would have to buy a computer program. It is a controversial bill, but my experts tell me that in all likelihood it's going to pass. To be continued.
So for those of you to understand this, that means someone has to go out to the jail and talk to these folks ahead of time to.
They don't necessarily need to
go to, but they have to qualify the.
There will have to be a staff person either hired under the judges directly or as a probation officer who would oversee and ensure that they run the ORAS program and take and look at the risk assessment. Now, what some smaller counties do is they have an officer at the jail, corrections officer, fill out a form, fax it into the municipal court, and the court will then look at it. I don't think that's the best way to comply, but it is certainly a cheaper way to comply. But then the municipal court ends up offsetting the salary of that corrections officer that does that paperwork. You know, we have a good working relationship with our sheriff, but honestly, I think he's in the same situation we are in where there just isn't a lot of additional staff to shove work to. So it's something we will have to work out. And it's not just arrested people, it's people who are summoned in on certain offenses. So it even means on our walk-in arraignments, people who are not at the jail also have to undergo this analysis about whether or not they're a flight risk, which is, well, we all use our common sense. But again, if it's a statute, we will have to follow it, whether we agree with it or not. So heads up. I'm obviously on the pool of judges who say this is bunk. Small counties do it right. We do analysis of our cases. We do bonds on weekends. We do read what we see. We know where people are coming from. Heck, half of the people that get arrested, I know who they are. I mean, I don't want to be rude, but it's Delaware County. We do know a lot of the people that get arrested on the weekends. This algorithm has not been especially proven in the municipal court setting. It is a felony tool, okay? And it works okay for felonies, but not necessarily misdemeanors. And again, if it's a statute and it passes, I will follow it, but do understand that there will be a cost associated with that right now would come out of probably our probation department's budget.
Any other questions for us? All right, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Do you want to read 15, 16, 17? 18,
Yeah, they're all first reading.
and 18. Just so you know, just first readings. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Just finish up.
So close. You can stop. Yeah, go ahead. You can stop.
All right, ordinance number 18-111, an ordinance amending ordinance number 17-78, establishing the pay and benefits for various part-time and intermittent and seasonal employees of the city of Delaware and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, this ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, property, health, safety, and welfare of the city. The emergency clause is required to enact the changes effective on December 26, 2018. Therefore, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage. Ordinance number 18-112, an ordinance amending the management, professional, technical, confidential, and supervisory employees pay plan and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, this ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure necessary for the immediate preservation of the public peace, property, health, safety, and welfare of the city. The emergency clause is required to enact the changes effective on December 26, 2018, which coincides with the new calendar year. Therefore, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage. Ordinance number 18-113, an ordinance establishing new salary rates for the mayor and members of city council effective January 1st, 2020, and repealing ordinance number 13-44. And ordinance number 18-114, an ordinance amending the schedule of fee and service charges.
So Jackie, I don't know if you want to just quickly just review the three pay plan ordinances for two actually for the city, but I think this is just the first reading. I don't think there's any major.
Sure. There, just minor increases, 2% through the management pay plan, and then 2% for the part-time and seasonal pay plan as well. There are no other changes to anything else in there. The department head pay ranges have been increased. If you remember, we have three different levels. Those have been increased. Other than that, there haven't been any changes. I think we're going to talk about tonight some of the personnel changes that have been requested, so we can get into that a little bit more later. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
And then the schedule of fees and service charges, the biggest change there is just how we handle the inspection costs that we pass on to the development community. And I think during Bill's presentation, we can discuss that. That's in here. We have not forgotten the proposal on the impact fees that really need to be acted on separately. And I know George had mentioned that before, and that's something that needs to be brought before council, but there's that will be forthcoming. So I don't know if there was anything else on the charges and fees.
On the fee ordinance?
Yeah.
I don't know if council cares about it that much. The small, you remember we went to have a lawsuit with the small cell legislation with the state. They had their compromise legislation and the feds passed some stuff. And so we have our fee designed to fit both of them. So that's a fee change, schedule, a new fee for these small cell facilities. That's a new thing on there as well.
Maybe this will come up in Bill's conversation, but I think part of that fee ordinance there is the way we do inspections with builders. And
yes.
It designates some fees, but I think we need to identify how that procedure is going to work. Are we going to require a deposit from the builder? Or are we just going to,
okay,
to be my recommendation. So I think we just need to flesh that out.
Okay. That's good.
So we're good?
Yeah. I need a 5-minute recess.
You do?
Well,
okay.
You don't have to, but.
That's okay. You can have a 5-minute recess. Okay. Okay, we'll come back.
To budget review. and
Yeah,
discussion.
start at 19?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll be rejoin at 8:17. Got 5 minutes?
Do you have any
We'll call the meeting back to order. And we're in session at 8:18.
Just a couple of, introductory comments. I know. So the budget process was challenging, as it always is. But I think, fortunately, we were able to, present a budget that reflects some modest increases in areas where directors had made requests. We weren't able to fulfill 100% of the requests that were made, but I did try to make an effort to acknowledge some of the areas where we want to increase our level of service. In some cases, just kind of keep up with what we face. And so I think the police department is an example of that. And I know there was some supplementary information I can provide to council regarding staffing in the police department that the chief and I had discussed in terms of the calls for service and things like that. And actually, Councilman Hellinger had asked me about that last week. So we'll provide that as supplemental information. If there's information that you request through the budget process, just let us know what it is, or let Elaine know.
I think by Wednesday, is that what we decided? Yeah.
So the request is, if you have questions following tonight's meeting, let Elaine know, and then we can get that information compiled and back to you before next Monday night, or it's part of next Monday night's work. Part of the work session.
Right. But at least we know the instructors definitely have to be
right. So, but tonight really we're focusing on some of the changes, some of the personnel changes that were made to the various, to some of the directors, and we start obviously with I don't know how Bruce draw the short straw on this one, but
I volunteered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of council, the budget that's presented to you this year addresses some significant issues we've been experiencing over the years in terms of our manpower. I don't think it's a mystery that, as we grow as a city, so do our calls for service. Another thing that actually affects us as significantly is the geographic area we have to respond to. So as we are building out down south, it's stretching us out further and further, which is increasing response times. Not significantly yet, but it is beginning to be problematic when you're running across the city and when you work in minimum staff. So we are starting to see those increases over the last 10 years starting to catch up with us. Another issue that we're at the size now where we struggle with attrition every year. Every year I've been chief, we've almost been close to being fully staffed, but we're not. We have someone who's on FMLA, or we have someone who's injured, or we have someone who retires, and we're always short officers, which impacts our ability to provide services on the street. Some of the other things that we have to look at in terms of the service we are providing is the expanding realm that we have to provide that service in. And by that, I'm talking about one, we're a destination for special events, and that's great. But along with that, for me, comes very significant responsibility in terms of public safety, because it is also a potential target. And so you'll notice when we do First Friday, when we do Ironman, when we do the races, we have multiple officers assigned just to that event, and they're coming in and they're working over and above their hours of duty. And that, in conjunction with some of the things we've been trying to do with community relations by expanding our non-traditional activities in the community, has really stretched us thin over the last year. And this year has been a turning point for us. We started off we hit the ground running this year with a couple serious crimes, and it seemed like we didn't slow down. We got into the summer and we had a special event or something big going on virtually every weekend this summer through August. So it was a trying early part of the year and summer up until about this point. So with that being said, it's a welcome addition to add 2 additional officers to the budget this year that will be put directly into patrol. Our mission is patrol. That is the foundational thing that the police department does, is police officers in cars patrolling the city. Everything else we do should make that unit stronger, and these officers are going to go into patrol to supplement those numbers and help us do our job. One of the things I take pride in, is that our officers, when we're busy, they're staying busy. So they see a problem. They don't just respond to calls for service. Being busy isn't an excuse. Being busy is something that we do. So when there's a problem out there, a lot of these drug complaints we've seen, a lot of the drug crimes and a lot of the overdoses, we've really mitigated a lot of that because of the activity of our officers. They do a lot of stuff with their unassigned time designed to keep that stuff away. We don't have chronic hotspots. We chase people around, and that's good. So we are going to supplement patrol with those 2 additional positions. Some other things I'm going to do to add to that includes reallocating and reclassifying some positions to bolster patrol. The full-time community impact officer, which is a patrol position, is going to be placed back into a patrol shift. So that position will no longer exist as a flexible schedule fluid officer. That's a little bit of a tough position to take, but I felt it was important to put that officer back on the street to supplement our primary mission of street patrol. It does not change our philosophy. It does not change what we're going to do. We still believe and you'll hear this from our line guys up. They question why are we doing that if we believe this is so important, and we still do believe it's important. We're just not going to do it with one person. We're going to continue to do the things we're doing to look at different opportunities. In fact, if anyone's available tomorrow night at Willis at 6 o'clock, we're doing Hidden in Plain Sight, which is a drug presentation where we were educating parents on all the tricky ways that the kids may hide, use, or conceal drugs. So that's one of the things we're going to continue to do. And then the other personnel classification or other change I want to make is we currently have 1 canine, Ollie, who I consider a force multiplier. He helps us work faster. He's very effective with the drugs, and he's great at PR. We are going to add another canine officer next year, and we'll do that with our existing patrol strength. So it maintains that position in patrol, and we can also thank our drug dealers for providing with the funding, because I will use drug seize money to provide for the canine and the equipment that it takes to staff that position. The final change will be really just a transfer of the part-time parking control officer that we were intending to hire this year. We never did because some of the anticipated changes didn't occur. So we're going to take that position and place it into records and have a records analyst, someone who can help us with our document management, our digital evidence, our video, our public records requests, and some of our policy and document management. It'll be a benefit to our records division and also our patrol division to have someone dedicated to those functions. So those are the major personnel movements we'll be seeing next year, hopefully. And then some of the other major projects in the budget are when we constructed the building in the early 90s, when we moved in, we had probably about half the officers. So right now we have limited space for evidence. We've expanded our evidence retention room, but we don't have anywhere for officers to package, bag, tag, and process evidence. And I wish I'd have taken a picture of it, because I came in the other day and walked into our report writing room, and one of the guys had made a traffic stop and recovered a couple baggies full of drugs and had it sitting out next to his computer. And I probably could have walked back in there at lunchtime and taken a picture of the same computer, and you would have seen a pop and a snack sitting at the same computer, and that's not a good combination. So that's one of the major projects, is to move some people around the building and take a room and build a workstation, put some downflow draft filter stations on there so we have some clean air, and we can have evidence isolated in a safe environment where it can be contained and tagged and marked up and then set into property without contaminating another room. And then we also had security audit of our computer systems through the state and the federal government leads. They wanted us to add some security to some of our doors and records. So right now we keep them shut and locked, which is really difficult when you forget your keys to get through the building. We'll be adding some fobs, some of the security fobs to those doors, and also making better use of the space in our armory area. So those are the major items. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? So with all of the extra special events and that, how do we, I know Ironman pays us because that's our nonprofit. How are we going to fix this? I mean, we definitely want the events. We definitely need the security. There's got to be money put aside just for this to keep us allowed to have these events and yet keep people safe here. I mean, have you thought much about it?
Oh, we've thought a lot about it. There's a couple schools of thought. Some of the sponsors and some of the people who hold these events should share in the cost. If we feel that it's beneficial to have the events here, then we can continue to staff it. So, really, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there. It really is a philosophy of how you want these events to be funded and how you want them to be staffed.
It's not fair that it comes out of your budget. I mean, we've got to figure out a different way to do this, because I think about the Arts Festival, and there's a lot of police dollars for that. There's no way they can fund it, and then I think about the old horse parade that we all enjoy that takes tons and tons of officers.
Mm-hmm.
How do we say no to that one? There's got to be a way to figure this all out. Jackie, did you have something? You look like you were ready to go.
Yeah, this is something the Special Events Committee has struggled with for a number of years, but more specifically, we put together the numbers of what it would take, what each of the special events that we currently have, what the costs are. It's not just for our police department, but it's our fire, public works, and administrative. That it's not only the cost to have the officers and have the public works staff down there with the equipment. It also, we are now experiencing a lot of fatigue. Chief said that there are weeks that our staff really can't even get any time off because there's special events, which is what we want. But I think we're at a decision point, in my opinion anyway, that, either we make a policy decision that everybody pays, or we come up with, we say, you know what, we're going to fund it. We're going to fund each department, or we're going to have some sort of rotary, something of that nature, but the decision needs to be made. We are so fortunate that we're this destination location for special events, especially because we don't have a Grand Canyon or anything sitting in our backyard. And so people want to come to Delaware, but there's an expense to that, and we have a duty to protect this community in making sure that we do have everything in place to make sure that they're safe when they're here. So I know that Tom probably has some information.
We included in the budget message not the recommendation, but some of the findings of the report, which is, I think we estimated $162,000
I think so, yeah.
costs.
Mm-hmm.
That's right now captured in all the individual budgets.
Mm-hmm.
So the overtime in the police department, the overtime in the public works department, we can isolate. Overtime in the fire department, we can isolate how many of those hours annually are dedicated to special events. Whether you put them in that budget or whether you carve them over here, they're paid out now and they're part of their annual operations. The question is how much are they trading off in terms of the time to get things set up and whatnot that they could otherwise be spending, the opportunity cost. And that, you can have a good discussion about that, but I think that we've always recognized that we're going to do what we can to help those special events to the extent that they can help offset those costs with money back to the city. They can, but it nowhere won't come close to what we spend. But I think we're in the same boat that Traverse City is and other communities where that's a cost of essentially doing business. When it gets to the point where you get into this issue with the fatigue factor and it's causing us, to not be able to get to the other projects, that's when it's a more significant issue. And I think one of the things that the chief was talking about was one of the things they're facing is, and the additional staffing can help address that, but it's still part of the other issue, I guess, is just the amount of effort it takes today for the protocol that we now require for street closings. We never used to completely close streets with concrete barriers and staffing there. I mean, that's, after Nice, France, we were directed, and the chief recommended that we increase our level of security. And that's now the kind of the baseline. And that, we just did it. And that actually, that, you know, requires more effort for Public Works because they have to come in 24 hours in advance and bring in those Jersey barriers. I don't know whether there's an answer for it per se, but I think it's a worthy conversation.
No, and I think there's a bit of inconsistency with how it's done too, and I think that causes confusion. Some events we staff, some events the sponsor staffs, and it's, you know, what's a city-sponsored event, what is not, and you know, it's probably something we need to formalize.
That has potential to give us some.
That's what, correct.
We have a lot of legacy events that have traditionally we've just supported. The All Horse Parade, Delaware County Fair, all of those those kinds of things are legacy events. The newer events that we have, we've tried to do, I think, a better job and have with getting that sponsor to help offset those costs. I know we've done that with a number of these. So
I think this year I've noticed, I don't know why, it just seems more prominent to me, but so much more patrolling around all schools, and I really appreciate that. I don't care which school I go by, I just seem to always see an officer nearby. I don't know if it's just different this year for some reason because of what we've been through as a country, but I appreciate it.
We try to be there, drop off and pick up, and then we had our threat earlier this month, and so we've been trying to be a little more present.
But even before that, you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
So do you go to a smaller department, finance or
I don't know who
finance?
do
Dean's
this.
ready. Looks like he's up and he's ready.
The last one, I don't know how I got moved up there this year. It's great. Couple of highlights. The finance budget. Talk a little bit about 2018, but transition into 2019. We've the theme for the last year has been transitioning staff. Last year we've had 5 retirements in our department. We're not that big of a department. We had 2 other full-time positions that transitioned. So we've been interviewing and hiring quite a few people. We have 7 employees that have less than a year experience, and then there's 3 other employees that were promoted from within that have been in their positions for less than a year. So we're transitioning, plan on doing some training next year, obviously, get everybody up to speed a little bit, especially training and dealing with citizens and situations like that. So we'll focus on that in 2019. The other big issue we're doing is we're in the process of going through a selection process to upgrade our software in the system. We're looking at an enterprise-wide package that'll involve other departments, at least minimally as it pertains to purchasing and paying vendors and payroll and different things like that, but potentially in other areas too. Game plan is we should be in a position the first part of 2019 to go out for proposals and bring in probably 3, 4, maybe 5 software vendors and look at their software and make a determination what's in our best interest. Right now we've brought in someone to assist us with doing needs assessment, looking at what our expectations are, what are some of the areas we would like to see some improvement, so that when we do put a proposal out there, it's not just, you know, hey, what's your software? And I guess we'll take what you got. We're going to do our best effort to say these are our priorities, and we want to know how you can address them and assist in that regard. One of the big areas, I think a part of that is looking at keeping relative with how business is conducted. Things have really picked up, I think, the last probably less than 10 years with just transactional type of issues. The reality of we've gone through a lot of recruiting, but since I spent some time with that this year, even the type of employee we're recruiting is changing. They need to be able to work in a different environment. It's not like it was 25 years ago where we usually would hire some bank tellers. People were, counting cash and doing things like that because things are done a lot differently, and that's only going to continue going down the road. One of the priorities we have with looking at possibility with software applications is providing better access to data we have from a citizen standpoint. Also, we hope to improve access to how they pay bills. One of the things we're hoping that we can accomplish is putting in place some payment kiosks, even for things such as paying utility bills. Now we have a drive-up window that's staffed, but we're only there from 8 to 5. And I think we're looking at some capabilities, perhaps to convert that drive-up window to more of a automated machine type of thing, like an ATM. Biggest advantage is it's there 24/7. I think it can facilitate a little bit more, not just citizens having better flexibility in making payments, but also help with our staffing and in keeping a focused effort in the department, trying to keep our personnel levels at a minimum. For all intents and purposes, we haven't changed, especially in the utility billing office. When I came here, 1990, we had 3 people in the utility billing office, and we still have 3 full-time people. We fill in with some other people with vacancies and different things like that. But so far, we've been able to use the technology a little bit to help keep down increases in staff. Another potential change, at least I think it will change, is we're looking at some building changes downstairs, so the whole building as a whole. One of the things that's been put out there is looking at the security of City Hall. And through that process, we've already changed. We've changed access points, whereas we used to have the 3-door access. Now we just have the one down, at least for the public. And a part of that, although we weren't able to really implement until we at least had some discussion with City Council about making some building changes, was refocusing an effort down to this entrance down here. Part of what the only big change, and it's not that big of a change in the budget request, is to add an additional permanent part-time position. The person that we would hire would be just like right now we have 2 permanent part-time people that work that first floor, main level receptionist area that we put in place when we redid the building back in 1992, primarily knowing that people would come into the building needing some place to be directed. We're going to shift that more than likely down towards the entrance of the building where we're directing people and moving those 2 positions. Adding a third gives me the capability of not just making sure somebody's at that point of entry, being able to direct people, but it also provides the opportunity, I think, beneficial to the organization, trying to create more of a central cashier type of scenario, enabling people to have a place, if we can accommodate their paying their permits or parking tickets or utility bills online without having to come to City Hall, because we'll always have people that don't have checking accounts, they don't, let alone credit cards, that will have a place where they still can make payments like that, but really kind of pull that in from the departments. We have point of sale, cash type of things at a lot of our different departments, and really I don't think we necessarily need to do that. I think that can help them not, the departments not have to deal with, those sort of, a good example is Public Works, that, they've instituted a program where people can have bulk pickup of refuse. I think right now they go down to the Public Works garage and whether they pay $25 or whatever it costs. It's one thing we can perhaps provide some means where people can do that online, but you're still going to have people that are going to want to come and pay. I don't think we need to necessarily direct them to the Public Works facility to do that. Hopefully with the software upgrade, we can link our various departments, and that central cashier should have access to, the underlying issues that are going on in the department, even if it's something that's done in City Works or whatever else, that we should be able to handle receiving certain transactions. Ultimately, when the planning department moves next door here, I think there's going to be a change in flow in the building a little bit. And I think that possibility exists, although we really haven't gotten into the details, that we could probably have even at least the people coming in just getting a fence permit or a deck permit, even if they do come into City Hall. I mean, some of that stuff they could probably do online. We want to make sure we can handle the electronic transactions that they can, like you do with a lot of other Cyber Monday. Maybe we'll have a Cyber Monday sale too. We can do that with our online. I've asked the software vendors if they can accommodate that. But there are going to be people that are going to come into the building. They're going to have to work their way around. I think there's ways we can enable them, even if they have to come to City Hall to go onto a computer or kiosk or whatever. And, step 1, steps 2, step 3, this is what you need to provide to get your deck permit. And hopefully they can swipe a card there and deal with the transaction. We'll know what's going on. We can monitor those credit card or those type of payments. But if they absolutely need to pay, write a check or whatever, they can be directed down to this cashier. We can take their payment. And we have one point primarily where some of that's occurring. We're not quite sure what the redesign of the building may look like to accommodate, again, security type of issues. But I think generally it's going to be, hopefully having a staff position down there that as people come into the building and do need to be directed, we can direct them where to go. I'm not sure the solution for how we protect the other people, the utility billing people and the income tax. It's kind of difficult not to, have face-to-face interaction with taxpayers coming in, trying to kick around how that could be accomplished, yet still, because it doesn't do us much good if we have locks and stuff like that, but if the building's open and people can come in, 8 to 5 anyways. But we're going to hopefully work through that. And that'll be a bit of a change for us, but we'll see how that plays out. That's really all I had. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Lee or Darren?
I got
You have a PowerPoint?
Oh, yeah.
Come on, Lee, hurry up.
No.
Mayors and members of council, it's great to be here to talk about additions to the Community Affairs office. We had this in the budget last year, but it didn't make the final cut. But I'm pleased to see that this year's budget includes a proposal for a permanent part-time position, a communications specialist, that will greatly help the department. We created our communication and marketing efforts 13 years ago from scratch. And I think over the years, it's become a respected and well-regarded operation. But how we communicate with our residents and how we engage with them has changed in 13 years. And this position will help add some capacity to that, specifically with our digital media, with more videos, and just the expectations of how and when we communicate with our residents. So I'm excited to have this position in place in 2019, and really look forward to working with this person. I think that it will attract a good pool of candidates that will also allow us to do some other things apart from some of the things I mentioned before. So happy to answer any questions on that.
Will this person be doing most of the social media? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, they'll assist with that. I mean, we have a pretty robust social media now, but goodness, we can do it better. And this person will help with that. There's a part of it that I'd really like to do more of that, quite honestly, I don't have the time right now, is to be more strategic. Instead of, being the first person to jump on the next craze in social media, I'd really like to make sure we're using what we already have to its best capacity. And we can do that through looking at some of the analytics that I haven't had the time to do. So this person would help with that. I think that's a place where we can really improve and make some headway that will allow for just better communication and better quality. So yes, they will, but I'll still be involved. It'll be very much a team atmosphere.
Continue the newsletters that you do that I think are.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Well, right. All the tools will stay in the toolbox. But like I said, I want to do more video in 2019. I mean, that's what people want. And there's lots of things you can do with that. It doesn't all have to be 30-second video with, there's lots of things we can do.
You can't offer them, it's very good.
Yeah. I'd like to do, I think we can do more with Instagram. We're really scratching the surface on that. Ted and his parks team are doing more than with his Instagram than the city is with its Instagram account. So I'd like to do more there. I think there's an avenue there to just communicate with another audience in a different way, and this position would help with that.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Cue up my awesome PowerPoint.
I thought you were joking.
No, I really do have one. We were told to make materials and stuff.
Oh, you were told that? By whom?
Suggested.
I
It was
said, do
suggested,
what you
huh?
had to do to tell your story the best way.
Believe me, I just.
PowerPoint.
Right now, Lee's winning. Yeah. Going after Lee was like the worst decision I ever made. It's not too long, but basically thank you, Dave. The one thing that's different in our budget this year is we're requesting a paralegal position. To give you a little bit of background, we've talked about the part-time paralegal position, sorry. I was going to get to that, I promise. In our prosecutor's office, we've talked about, and if you heard the Judge Hemmer talk, we have had an increase in cases at the municipal court. The traffic cases may be down, but those are the ones that we don't typically do a lot with. But the increase in cases we think is just, population's growing. We have noticed a spike in certain kind of cases coming out of the outlet mall a few years ago. The state changed this theft threshold where you can steal up to $1,000 and it still be a misdemeanor. And then finally, we've noticed just the workload. There's been more of those cases, a higher percentage has gone to hearings, appeals, and trials. So it's just more work by percentage for the cases we have. We didn't ask for any support staff up until kind of now because we had that consultant come in and give us process changes. So we've been a lot more efficient. So we're not necessarily asking for help focused solely on the prosecutor's office. Before I launch in this, I've been rude. Melissa Schiffel is our city prosecutor. She was here. She did have to leave because her husband's a police officer, so she's got to get there so he can go to a shift. But she did help me work on my proposal. So while this position would be useful in the prosecutor's office, and we've identified some things that they would do there, actually, we think the primary thrust of the position is to aid me on the civil side, providing support for me so that I can increase the service levels for things we're working on over here. So I thought it'd be good to talk a little bit about this so you know what you're getting into. You talk about paralegal and people kind of have a sense for what it is, but a paralegal is a professional who works with lawyers handling delegated substantive legal work for which the lawyer is ultimately responsible. So the typical example would be if I get a quick motion that we do over and over again, they can draft that motion rather than me doing it, and then I review it to make sure it's okay, and then I sign it. So they can't go to court, but they have the training to do that background stuff. They do require a paralegal degree or certification. The degree is a 4-year degree, and that certification is like an associate's, that's a 2-year degree, depending on the level you want. As Tom mentioned, this would be a part-time position. Based on where we think it would slot in there, it would be about 20 hours a week. That's about 1,500 hours a year. And the total cost in the budget, including all the benefits and things, is a little under $30,000. Not benefits, but they're part-time, but the stuff you pay in addition to your salary. The reason we want this position, there's kind of 3 main thrusts, and then I'll get out of here and answer any questions. One is efficiency. This position will bridge the gap between our clerical staff that we have at the prosecutor's office and the legal work performed by attorneys, so they can review, draft, and record easements and some deeds. I currently do that all right now, but they're all kind of based on the same template. So you're going to look at it to make sure there's nothing snuck in there, but you don't need your city attorney reviewing a template document necessarily unless there's a question or something that comes up. Another is drafting form motions and responses. That would mostly be in the criminal division, but there are certain things they do kind of all the time. They get a motion to continue and we file a motion in opposition that you don't need your attorneys necessarily doing that drafting work, when you can have somebody who has a little bit closer to the level of expertise in that area. Another thing that a paralegal can do that can really be a help for me in particular and also our attorneys is conducting legal research and maintaining that research library so we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Right now I have Chris Ballard, who is a assistant city prosecutor, assistant city attorney. He comes here on Fridays and he helps with a lot of these research questions, especially the complicated ones. But there are certain things that, someone who's trained in this area, they're trained how to do legal research, can pull off our time so we can focus on more complicated issues. And then finally, they can respond to public inquiries that are pretty simple to do, but our clerical staff really shouldn't be talking about kind of legal processes type stuff, and your attorneys are in court all the time, or I'm working on mediations or things, and simple things like, hey, can you tell me the status of this case? Or, hey, can you tell me what part of the city code, says I can only have 2 dogs? I can look that up. It takes me about half an hour to find it, but so could our paralegal devoting the time for that. I believe that moving these tasks from attorneys to a paralegal who's at a lower rate will increase efficiency because our rate's just more expensive than this paralegal would be. I also think this position will help reduce the compensatory time, particularly for our prosecutors, and overtime, which is at time and a half for our support staff over at the prosecutor's office. And I'll explain that in a little bit. In addition to what I think will make us a little bit more efficient, we're trying to increase service levels. And there's a lot of reasons, but these are the 3 main ones. One, public records requests. I currently handle that pretty much all by myself. We get a request, I divvy it out to the person who I think has the records. I kind of hope they respond to me, and then honestly, I move on to something else. And sometimes a week later, I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. So I'm hoping having this person set up a tracking system to manage it, to make sure when the request goes out, follow up to make sure we get the records back in a timely manner. I think that'll increase our response times. We'll get records out faster, and it'll increase consistency in responses because we often get similar requests, and they might be able to say, hey, we've already responded to this request. I'm just going to give them that same packet. We have already got it. Finally, one thing I would have loved to be able to do for this budget to explain the need for it is to tell you exactly how many records requests we do in a year. I just don't have the support capability to track and generate that. So I would like this person to say, this is how many records requests we did. This is how many pages we did. This is what we did. So reporting will be helpful to know based on what we're doing. Similarly, tracking deeds and easements. The process works with that is that we get them in from either engineering or utilities. They send them to me to review. I take a look at them, say they look fine. They somehow make it back over there. They get signed, and then I go record them at the recorder's office. This will increase the speed of that because someone will be watching it, so we'll get these development projects moving a little bit better. It also will eliminate misplaced documents. That process is very paper heavy. We don't have a digital process for that yet, and I can't tell you what happens to them sometimes. That, hey, I put it on your chair, it's not there. I gave it to this desk here, it's over engineering, and then, oh, I found it in this folder. So having a tracking process will eliminate any potential hiccups. And then finally, again, I'd like to report on how many deeds and easements we've reviewed. I just review them and send them along. I don't have a log or anything. I just don't have the capacity to do that. And then finally, service level improvement is providing litigation support. We're becoming increasingly involved in large litigation lawsuits where there's a bunch of documents and a bunch of depositions and hearings and things. And I'm finding that sometimes that level of paper that we're just dealing with, collecting all these records and tracking them and responding to these discovery requests, it can become very burdensome for me without a dedicated support person. And when I'm working with our insurance company attorneys, I'm usually liaisoning with a paralegal. So the paralegal's setting up the meetings, the paralegal's collecting the documents, the paralegal's sending me the updates on behalf of the attorney. That's because it's keeping their costs down. So obviously I would be doing the legal work and reviewing the briefs, but if someone can quarterback here's the meeting time, here's the schedules, that'd be a huge burden off our end. In addition, when we're going to a hearing or a training, I'm collecting all the documents myself, I'm organizing, I'm trying to make a binder. It would be very helpful to have someone trained in legal work to get that binder ready for me so I have everything organized, and especially with the criminal side, the prosecutors, they can go to trial with the binder, which will reduce their prep time. Finally, the last big piece of our puzzle is backup support and leave coverage. So right now our office is staffed with 2 administrative assistants and a diversion manager. When the administrative assistant says we have it organized, each do different tasks, although they're trained in both. But when one goes on vacation or is sick, there's really no one else there to do it. So either they do it when they come back working overtime, or the other person just tries to do both, and sometimes mistakes gets made. So this would provide a backup coverage for that. In addition, Tim Dawson is our investigator diversion manager. He's got no one who helps with his job or knows what he's doing. So this would provide support for him. So he might be able to devote less to diversion and more to investigation, but also if he's sick or not there, we have someone who can help do the intake and review and tracking of that system. So those are sort of the 3 main prongs of why we asked for this position. I tried to keep it lean and mean, but I'd be happy to answer any questions council has.
That was a great business case.
Really? Oh, thanks. See, Lee, PowerPoints do the trick.
So, I know you don't have an exact number, but how many records requests you get? 10, 50, 100, 200? You have no clue?
I tried to so the way I manage them right now is when I respond to a records request, I keep a copy in my sent email folder. So I would say, let's say 100 a year. But some of them are pretty easy, and some of them are really complicated. Like if someone's trying to sue us, they'll often do a records request for everything before they do. So that could be a big everything request. I will say the police department has a very good records program where if someone's asking for a police report, they just handle that without necessarily getting me involved. When there's something weird, like somebody wants a report for someone who hasn't been charged, but they kind of know the report is there, there's an exception called uncharged suspects, so we decide what they're allowed to get because we want to protect people who haven't actually been charged with a crime, because it's not fair just to get their name out there. So that I get involved in those, but if it's just a simple media call for report, they're pretty streamlined, and that number is probably way more than my 100. But we've just been getting some big ones, you can imagine.
Yeah. Okay, I was just curious. That's funny because I was going to ask you that question and you said, I don't really know.
I would, yeah. And the other thing is I have examined some software where you can actually track it and then log everything you've given to the person. So again, we don't have the capability right now, but it would be nice if someone asks a records request and then ends up suing us to know what they have. I mean, you'd think it'd be pretty basic, but we just don't have that capacity right now.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Do I do anything else?
He just sits over there smiling.
He's got more charts.
Well, I have 8 budgets, which is why I'll keep it brief. Okay.
We're not gonna get the full free now.
No, not tonight. Really, I just want to go through, you don't have 8 budgets, but I just want to go through some of the real highlight issues you should be aware of in each one of them. So engineering division, I just put the page number up there for reference. You have this information, you can look at it later. Talk about personnel. There is one engineer in there, Jessica Almeroyd. Many of you know her. She came to Public Works. We put her there back in 2012, even ahead of myself, to try to get the traffic management group under control. She still effectively acts as a crew leader. We still don't have a crew leader for that division, so she does maintain that responsibility. She also designs all of our major capital projects, the overhead detection project, and also supports all of the land development in terms of traffic studies, traffic reviews, plus just day-to-day. We've made a couple requests in the past to move her up to her engineer 3 level, which we do believe she's deserves that. We were able to put that into the budget this year. And so that would be the only personnel change in the engineering division. $30,000, which would be our second and final phase of what we call the through Iron Mountain, our digitization process. And just an example right there, the one plan, oops, I'm sorry. I showed you here at the bottom. Usually see Dave's fancy plans, land development, colors, and what things look like. We're talking about just the hardcore engineering plans, all the details underground. That's what we're digitizing, close to 20,000 plan sheets we're putting in, and right now about 14,000 of them are in Pennsylvania right now being digitized. This will cover the last section of them, and sometime around maybe March, April, we'll have all of the engineering documents digitized and available for permanent and more ready access.
It frees up a lot of space.
It will free up an awful lot of space. I think it's 15, 20 flat files, each one with 5 drawers in it. Will be, in fact, we're selling those files right now, so we don't need them anymore. And there's no market for them because everyone's digitizing their plans. So we'll probably get a little better than scrap value for them. Also, we alluded to a little earlier, Ken had a question on our inspection services. There is $800,000 number in the budget. It does cover largely, probably 90% of that goes just towards our construction inspection services. We hire 1 or more companies out there to represent us in the field, sometimes as many as 15 men and women out there representing the city on these sites. In the change in fees, you're going to see a change in how we do business, and what we're going to do is what we call reconciliation process, where we're really only going to charge each project exactly what those construction inspection costs really were. We do track all those now. Majority of those costs come through contract inspection, so every month we know exactly how much that project is accrued. So our intention will be we're scrapping the old process where we're estimating, a year and a half worth of work, and we're just going to go to as soon as we get a monthly billing, we're going to pass that right on to that developer. So if a developer doesn't pay, we know right away within 30 days that they are not going to play along well. We could call them in, pull our inspectors off, and stop the project. I don't predict that being an issue at all, especially not with the large tract developments. The small developers will spend more time up front explaining the process to them, that they are going to start receiving invoices fairly quickly, and they need to follow the rules that through finance and how many days they have to pay those. So that's where the majority of costs come from, and through the BIA several meetings, they've indicated if we can rectify that construction inspection side of the cost, they'll be very pleased with that. So the plan review side, we're not proposing any changes in that fee structure, but certainly in the construction inspection. So in the end, whether that's in 6 months on a small project or 2 years on a large project, the cost will be reconciled. The developer will only pay what the true costs were. Why this is important: some developers have very good control over their sites and can control their costs and get good quality. Other ones don't. And what should take 4 months can take 14 months. And those projects cost more money. So it works to our benefit in the sense that those that cost a lot more, we have mechanism now to capture additional funds. Those who are extremely efficient benefit in the development community because they're only going to pay exactly what that project cost.
We're going to bill monthly.
We'll bill monthly. Yep. No questions on that. I'll go to the building maintenance division. No adjustments in the staffing there, just 2 projects I wanted to make you aware of. The first is we've talked about the clock on top of City Hall, or the 4 clocks on top of City Hall. The old controller, it's a bunch of switches there on the 2nd floor. It's electrical mechanical system, 25 years old, just doesn't work anymore. You get different times, different phases. The device in the middle is the new solid state controller, and it will allow us to program the dates ahead of time, just like you can with things you put in your home. The other thing I wanted to make you aware of too is when I was dealing with city manager and Dean in the budget, there was a mistake from staff regarding the actual cost. They thought the controller plus a lighting package was close to $17,000, and we cut that down to say $9,000 for that. It turns out they came back and said, no, that's the whole package. We can do the controller and do an LED lighting project on top of City Hall. So the approved amount right now, although it says for the clock controls, it can also do LED package on the cupola in City Hall if council is so wishes to do that.
It's a bonus.
It's a bonus.
And that can be,
all the time. Can we make it blue?
yeah, we'll have, we're looking at that now, so all types of possibilities there. The building on the right is just another example of another City Hall with what an LED package looks like, so that could be our City Hall too. On the right, also the last thing is a water saving and really a hygienics project that we have, again, converting all the faucets in public restrooms into sensor controls. So they only run when your hands are there. People can't turn them on, stuff paper towels down the drain and walk away. And so it will help us with some maintenance issues. Also just be good for water saving and just good for hygiene these days. So that project will happen as well. Under street maintenance, I will say that we have supplemental information that we did promise a couple weeks ago and it's almost ready to come out. I'll get it to city manager. This is detailed information on all the street and traffic maintenance projects in terms of a breakdown of all the revenues, breakdown of where that money comes from and where it goes to, and the program needs. That's a separate thing we'll just send out so you can read that on your own time. Reclassifications, there's 2 technicians that we want to reclassify, and how we do this is when I first came up with Works, there's just an attrition. When a position leaves, someone else gets to move into that position, regardless of where that position is in the pay structure and necessarily the skill set. I wanted to create a mechanism that encourages all of our technicians to be trained to higher levels on more pieces of equipment to gain more skill sets. And so that's how we move people through the process now. So people are encouraged to learn some of the information we put out there, to go through some of the training on their own time, after work, learn machines, so they can become a better employee. And the reward for that, becoming a better employee, is that we can reclassify those positions to a higher pay level. And not everyone is going to take the time to do that, but those who are good employees we want to keep do benefit from that. And so we have 2 employees this year from going from the very first level to the second, and then from the second level to the third level, which we would consider capable of being a crew leader. And that kind of reestablishes a person back as a crew leader within Public Works. We don't really have that position right now for streets, and now we will with that. 134,000 increase for professional services. That's a bonus, really, I say, from city manager. Those were we added more funding. After we started going through the budget process, Tom called me and said, can we use it? I said, well, sure we can. That's 42% more for certain items than we had previously. That's going to buy more asphalt, more concrete, allow us to have more contractors with our crack seal. So that's a big help right there to get that line item up higher. Again, this information that we'll send you will provide more details of where that money goes and what the needs are, but certainly $134,000 increase over prior year level will be very, very significant. And then our $170,000 winter snow and ice budget is very solid. Again, it depends on cost of salt. Right now, it's still holding in there between $65 and $70 a ton, which has allowed us to fill our barn for the wintertime. On the bottom, just 2 pieces of equipment. On the left, that's a V-body salt spreader box that goes in the large tandem truck. That replaces an old unit. It sits in storage like that, and when we need it, the truck just backs up to it, and the legs fold up, and the unit's installed in the truck, attaches in. When we're done, we can pull it right back out. Very efficient, allows us to keep our mainline dump trucks become salt vehicles with very little effort in terms of getting the equipment in. On the right side is a smaller version of that, a polyethylene that we'll use in our 1-ton pickup trucks. We almost exclusively take care of cul-de-sacs now with our 1-ton trucks and smaller blades, because it takes close to 20 to 25 minutes for a large truck to do a cul-de-sac because of the turning radius. Actually, our small trucks can get in there a lot faster. So this provides them the ability also to salt them when they're finished doing that. So we'll purchase a couple of those this year as well. Traffic maintenance, that's the other reclassification we see. Technician 1 to 2, again, a young fellow came in, has done very well. A lot of their training, they require licensing to work on certain components of our signals. Most of that training is at home, going through manuals before they can resend them to take the test. So that definitely makes a better employee, and those are the kind of folks we want to have, are willing to, in a sense, educate themselves outside the office. Like streets, we have a 32,000 increase in professional services and operating supply also in the traffic department. That just helps out with all the programs. You see all the pictures there
Everything in there are just the day-to-day responsibilities, and that's where the majority money in traffic goes to. I just wanted to point out that we weren't able to fund this year any of the RFBs or DSFB signs. That's your speed feedback signs and your rapid rectangular flashing beacons. Those are great projects to be able to do those. We have a list of where a lot of these can go, but they are expensive. The speed feedback signs are $7,500 a pair, and the RFBs are close to $15,000 a pair. It's a lot of money. Put those in. Again, information in here, we'll talk about locations and an overall budget at some point. If we can get to that point, be able to fund more of those. Refuse and recycling, I just put those together. Again, no adjustments in staffing, but 2 large vehicle purchases this year. First is the $245,000 refuse unit, and on the bottom left corner you can see our toter on the ground, and then the toter on the picture is it's not blue, but it's black. This is an automated, this will be our second automated vehicle purchase. The operator can stay in the cab and pull up and pick up the number of toters they need to with a mechanical arm. Hopefully they'll get good at it eventually. It won't be like bowling and knocking over all the toters. But obviously there's some joystick control. Actually, the millennials or child might even get faster than some of the older guys. But it's all joystick control, and they should be very efficient. And the system going to toters already is the most efficient system right now in the country, well documented. What this will largely do is really prevent the number of ankle, knee, and shoulder injuries we have jumping down and pulling those toters. We all have put probably a little too much weight in our toter from time to time. And you got to keep in mind those guys got to pull those up to the current machines. So this will be new introduction into town, and this will be the second purchase of them. On the right, you see, item 4, $140,000 item, and that's for recycling. We've never had to pay for recycling before the program. We obviously pay for staff and equipment, but to actually pay our third-party contractor to take the material away and to sort it. And that's really what you're seeing is a sorting line. Tom and I visited our current contractor up in Marion, and it's very similar to that. A sorting line is nothing more than a big conveyor belt, and they pull out all the stuff and put it in bins. That's getting more expensive, and really what's really difficult right now on the right is just a sample of baled plastics, and the market is just down so low right now on recyclables, largely because the biggest importer, which is China, recyclables, has reset their standards to very minimum contamination. We can't meet that market easily in our country with how we do it. And even though curbside, separated curbside like we do provides the highest quality, still the contamination is too high. We're wrapped up with what everybody else is doing. So short of just ending recycling, we have to start paying for these costs. It may be a short-term cost depending upon the county's RP process, and they're proposing a recycling collection center, which would just change where we take the materials, and our cost could be reduced by at least half of that. So the future is looking good for it, but at least on an interim basis for the next 2 years, probably looking at this cost. In the big picture, it's a very small increase really to the overall cost to recycling, maybe $1 per month per resident for the increase. In spring, we'll bring forth changes to the utility rates overall, this number will be wrapped up in there as well.
Just related to that, City of Marion City Council is considering a resolution tonight that would really do 2 things. One, authorize their mayor to enter into an agreement similar to what we're going to be entering into with Sims. The second would be indicating that they've requested that DKMM provide some sort of grants back to the municipalities to provide curbside recycling, and they're looking for our support in that. So I'll keep you posted, but it looks like something, I don't know if you connected yet, but the councilman from Marion reached out to us, and the mayor and I spoke earlier today about it, the mayor of Marion. So it's just related that they're looking to the city to perhaps try to amend the plan that's supposed to be adopted by the district and ultimately by city council. And so we'll be talking about that, and I'll keep you posted, but that's related to what Bill's talking about.
And that's a good point. And the additional cost is in no way reflective of how we recycle. We have, between the city and Marion, we collect more recyclables per capita than all the rest of recycling in the DKMM district. So we're very, very efficient. well-liked program. We're close to 45% right now of people participating, so it's a really good program. It's just the fact that there's not a market for it. We can't help that, but we don't want to scrap the program. I guess no pun intended for that. I think recycling needs to continue on. Garage Rotary, just again, some pictures of what we do there. 487 no vehicles and pieces of equipment right now in the inventory that we have to take care of. And we have 3 mechanics and a supervisor to do that. We don't have an adjustment in staff proposed here, but it's kind of somewhat of a late rising issue is there's some pressure in terms of what we currently are able to pay our mechanics through our contract and what mechanics should be paid. And I use the term mechanic lightly. On the bottom, you see I got mechanic. We think of mechanics as tools and things like that, but there's as much technician in terms of technology, specialized analysis equipment, software, laptops on all these pieces of equipment. Even in something like a backhoe, there's an awful lot of PC in there. So and certainly on the fire trucks, there's more miles of wire probably on that one fire truck right there than there is probably sewer underground in the city of Delaware. So highly technical. So our mechanics are now technicians, and we're seeing that across Central Ohio through at least our initial work through DAS that we may be substantially underfunded in what mechanics can earn, and we don't want to get in a cycle of mentoring and training young mechanics and then walk out the door. So we'll just keep you posted. I'm working through DAS and city manager's office regarding this issue. They're already aware of it. But we didn't include any, we don't want to hit the panic button yet, but we just want to make you aware that that might be an area where, like anything with technology, generally the jobs start commanding higher salaries. So on the bottom, you see a training budget of $12,000. That's substantially higher by more than $10,000 in the past year. And that's because we need to get our current mechanics trained in softwares, diagnostic equipment and things like that, because you just don't learn how right now you can't begin to work on some of these vehicles without first plugging in and understanding. And so it requires constant software updates and training on these systems. Last is the airport division.
Chainsaw on the garage rotary division.
Because we take care of the chainsaws too.
Okay, just joking.
Yep. Anything from a chainsaw and weed whacker up to the fire equipment,
Okay.
and everything in between our mechanics.
Paid attention.
Yep. Thank you for that. No changes in airport personnel. One issue, important one, is our fuel terminal. We knew this would catch up with us, but chip cards, in order for us to continue to sell fuel through credit card, which is how everyone buys fuel out there, our current terminal cannot be upgraded. It's too old, so our supplier needs to replace that with software and terminals that can read chip cards. So that's what the upgrade is on that. And on the map, you can see I've circled that. It's right outside the terminal building, just in the south end of the main parking area. That's where our fuel farm is. And we sell both the Jet A and Avgas. The bottom line says we'll over last year about $49,000 more budget for general aviation fuel and $88,000 more for Jet A fuel than last year. And that's anticipation of the increased demand we have, especially in the Jet A, and we can definitely attribute that to that 800-foot runway extension. Absolutely. And when you hear things like someone flew from Central Ohio to the West Coast, it's because of runways like ours now where they can carry enough fuel and still have enough runway to take off a fully loaded Global Express jet and be able to fly all the way to California without having to stop. So we're confident that that 800-foot runway extension is increasing our jet fuel sales and also giving good advertisement to our airport. Item 4 on there, we're just calling it Hangar B roof replacement. Those 3 long hangars there on the right side, those are the original old T hangars from when they were on the south side of the airport. The roofs need to be replaced on those, 1 a year. I asked Joe today why B, because it has the most holes in it. So that's why Hangar B is the first one to be replaced. And we'll do Hangar A and Hangar C as well. They got sheet metal on it. They're more than 30 years old and just rusting through. So you'll see hangar projects in the future, and that's why it's circled. Those are the updates for those 8 budgets. If you have any specific questions on any of them, try to keep it brief. If not, have a great night. Drive safe.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
So part two will be next week from tonight, and we hopefully we can wrap it up with the rest of the operating departments and some of the other funds. So that's, if that worked out well, we'll just continue that same approach. And where are we on the agenda?
Finance Director's report, do you have anything to add?
Only that I inadvertently converted my Excel file to a PDF. I didn't attach all the worksheets, so sorry about that. I think Councilman Jim caught that.
I missed
good.
I need something to go to sleep to, so.
It's good that you were looking at it. Actually, it was a test to see if anybody even looked at the report. But no, I think we're in pretty good shape with our 2018 budget, so looks pretty good. Nothing else to add.
Thank you.
Yeah, I talked to you about recycling. We'll keep you posted on that. The ED 411, which I know Ken has always spoken highly about, and I know Sean attends. It's an all-day, no, half day. And they announced today that Governor-elect DeWine will be the guest. So hopefully, if you're interested, let Kim know, and we can get you signed up for that. We've got a tentative meeting set with the school board for January 28th. That would be your second meeting in January. We're going to try to do that like we've done in the past. They'll come down here, conduct some of their business, and then we'll meet jointly. So we'll try to keep most of your, hopefully, to council business to a minimum and be able to focus on an update from the schools, and we'll provide an update to them as well. So that's tentatively for the 28th. Tree lighting is
6:30 Friday.
yeah, and there is a full-blown traffic plan that all of our staff has been working on that will hopefully minimize the amount of congestion and improve crowd control and all the rest of it. We're learning each year as we go along, and there's some changes that you'll see this year, including a shuttle from downtown to Mingo Park.
In Hayes,
And
in the Hayes
lot,
building.
in the Hayes building. So that will be a big addition, and that will hopefully help with just the crowd, the circulation. And then I'll be at an all-day seminar tomorrow in Cincinnati on innovation and sustainability. So I will give you a full report along with Caroline Cicerci, who is our sustainability coordinator. So that's where I'll be, and that's my report.
Okay. Council comments?
One thing I have is I'll be at a conference in Philadelphia for the next 4 days, so it'll be difficult to get hold of by chance. So is that enough?
Okay, thank you. Drive safely.
Yes.
I have none, thanks.
Mr.
Nothing.
Just briefly, Tom, I just wanted to ask, we talked about getting a tip on the Seattle House Apartments. Where are we at with that?
I've got to find out if we've defined the area. I know I've talked to Sean generally about it. We just have to get it pulled together. I don't know when that, Dave, do you know when that project is slated? Spring? We just have to define the area and come back with the, yeah. Follow up.
This Friday night at 5:30 is also the tree lighting ceremony for the Andrews House. So that's at 5:30, then Main Street is at 6:30. On Saturday morning, there's a fundraising event for people in need at the Strand. They're showing the ELF. So if you want to bring canned goods and rolled up white socks, we're going to have a snowball fight at halftime during the movie. I get to go to it because we don't have a budget meeting. There's also Christmas covered at the Andrews House on Saturday, and then again the parade is on Sunday. And then the 14th is our city Christmas party at the Old Dog.
Old Dog Yell.
I just never get it right, so hopefully we'll see you all then.
Did you say Andrews House? It's 5:30?
5:30.
Okay.
I look for motion to, thanks guys for giving your reports tonight. I think that's going to help. So, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We're adjourned at 9:27.
You asked about that money for point